Well, hi everyone. My name is Anthony Hoyte-West. Greetings from Poland. I'm the new postdoc in the project that my colleague Michael Hornsby presented on earlier, which is about the revitalization of Lower Sorbian and Breton through new speakers. But today I'm going to talk to you about something that's a little bit linked to it, but it's very much a personal project of mine. I'm going to be looking at official certifications for Irish, Upper Sorbian and Catalan, and in a nod to the theme of the conference that we're having. Okay, I mean, we all know that there's many different language schemes, certification schemes now available. For English, there's the Cambridge test, Michigan test. For French, it's Delft. Italian, I think there's 4 or 5, Clida, Celli, Chils, and so on. One of the main developments in language certification over the past couple of decades has been the development of what's known as the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. In the picture over there, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Basically, it consists of 6 levels divided into 3 groups: most basic, A1, A2, then independent user, B1, B2, and finally proficient user, C1, C2. And the advantage of this was developed by the Council of Europe precisely for this reason. Is that language skills are comparable across a range of different languages. So for example, if someone has a C1 level in Albanian, that means that they have an effective operational proficiency in the language and they can study in the language and so on and so forth. The same if someone has a C1 in Spanish, they can also do the same things. One of the most important organization in language testing and certification at the moment is the Association of Language Testers in Europe, ALTE. It's a federation of 20, 30 full members and then a larger number of associate members representing all kinds of different languages and different institutions. And they promote best practice and certifications, i.e. they ensure that the best practice procedures are adhered to across different languages and different awarding bodies. As I've mentioned before, major international languages certifications, they have been studied not widely, but there have been some research projects conducted on them, mostly for English, for French, and for Spanish. Today, however, I'll be looking at minority languages in keeping with our interests. And this, as I said, it's a personal project. The choice is based on my own experiences as, trying to learn these languages. So I'll be firstly looking at Irish. They have the system called TEG, that's Jastas Jorpach Naguega. Upper Sorbian, Rečni Certifikat Hodnost Obširne, and also the international certificates for Catalan, which are offered by the Institute Ramon Llull and the Certificats Català. Basically, this is a very preliminary study. I'll be outlining and contextualizing these schemes in their relevant sociocultural context. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Irish language, but I just want to give you a very brief overview. Endangered language, of course, used to be spoken in medieval times widely across the whole island of Ireland, as you'll see in the map there. When Ireland became independent as Irish Free State in the early years of the 20th century, it was decided that Irish would be the first official language of the new country. So Ireland now has 2 official languages, Irish in the first position and English as the second. However, in common with many minority languages, there is uncertainty about the number of current speakers. The 2016 census stated that around a third of the population can speak Irish. They have some competence, but as you can see here on the slide, only about 70 to 80,000 people use it on a daily basis outside of school or university and so on. What's interesting about Irish is that it's actually an official European Union language and has been since 2007. Now, Ireland joined back in 1973, but it was only in the early 2000s that moves were put in place to make Irish an official language. As such, Irish is the first Celtic language and it's the only minority language to have the status of EU official language. However, it's not all been plain sailing because there's currently a derogation in place in the EU institutions. That means that the language is currently restricted. They can't provide the full level of translation and interpreting services, primarily due to the fact that there aren't really enough linguists with the requisite skills. However, next month, in fact, this derogation is scheduled to be lifted, but it remains to be seen what will happen then. Upper Sorbian, Michael already spoke about Lower Sorbian, as you'll see in the map here that features both parts of Lusatia, Upper and Lower. Sorbian is spoken, Upper Sorbian is spoken in Upper Lusatia. It's considered an endangered language. UNESCO actually count the two Sorbian languages together as one. Again, as Michael said, for Lower Sorbian, Upper Sorbian is also one of Germany's official minority languages. It too has a very long linguistic, literary, cultural tradition, but again, very, very few speakers, probably no more than 25 to 30,000. However, as with Lower Sorbian, there are moves to increase that number and to make the language more present in public life. Catalan, 10 million speakers, so completely different to the case of Irish and Upper Sorbian, spoken primarily in the northwest Mediterranean, in Catalonia, the Valencian community, Balearic Islands, also across the border in France, around Perpignan, and a tiny little outpost in Sardinia. So minority language, I mean, we could spend the whole afternoon talking about whether it's a minority language or not. Definitely it's a minoritized language. It is an official language, as I've got on the slide, in Andorra. But the situation with Catalan, sociolinguistic situation rather, is considerably more complicated. It had very high status in medieval times. Then, of course, the vicissitudes of history meant that there was loss of political independence, the Franco dictatorship, where the language was basically outlawed. Now, with the restoration of democracy in Spain in the 70s, Catalan now has co-official status in Catalonia, in the Balearic Islands and the Valencian community. Of course, there are still big debates nowadays about independence for Catalonia, and also recognition of the language at EU level. Of course, at the present time, it's not an official EU language. Who knows what could happen in the future. In terms of diaspora, all three communities have a big history of emigration. Irish, I mean, it's very, very well known, well documented, especially in North America, also in the Caribbean too. Upper Sorbian, again, tiny community in Upper Lusatia, but there are communities of diaspora communities in Texas and in Australia. Catalan, I mean, there are communities, the languages spoken elsewhere in the Iberian Peninsula as well as in Latin America. This is partly due to emigration after the Spanish Civil War and during the Franco dictatorship. The languages are well taught. Irish is taught across the world with a lot of support from Irish government here in Poznan, for example. There are Irish courses in the Celtic Studies department. Upper Sorbia, as Michael mentioned, you can learn it in France at the INALCO, at the Charles University in Prague, Ivan Franko National University in Lviv in Ukraine. The most developed network, though, is for Catalan. They have the Jacques Jalloul, this network of teaching Catalan as a foreign language at many, many different universities. Okay, as I mentioned, this is very, very exploratory, preliminary, personal project, literature-based, and hopefully good preparation for further work in the field in the future. These are my three basic research questions. Basically, how are these relevant certifications for the three languages organized? How are they recognized, both within the countries and at the international level? And how available are they? How easy is it to sit these examinations both nationally and internationally? So in terms of the first one, organization administration, well, the TEG exams for Irish are organized by Maynooth University. Some of you may know it as National University of Maynooth, National University of Ireland, Maynooth. It recently changed its name. They've been organized since 2005. So the Irish Language Centre is responsible. For Upper Sorbian, the exams are organized by this Vitai Sprachzentrum, which is a language center with support from the University of Leipzig. Michael also mentioned that they have teaching of Sorbian there. The Sorbian Institute, which is a kind of cultural organization for the Sorbs in general, both groups. That's been organized since 2016, so that's much newer than the one for Irish. The one that's been offered for the longest time has been the examinations for Catalan offered by the Institut Ramon Llull. The institute is basically responsible for promoting Catalan language and culture outside of the areas where Catalan was traditionally spoken. It has strong links with the Catalan government, the Generalitat, and other Catalan-speaking cultural organizations, both within the Iberian Peninsula and beyond. Moving swiftly on, okay, this is the table. You can also consult it in the book of proceedings, which is just to give an overview. As you'll see, at present, no one certification has got all 6 levels of the Common European Framework offered. They are planned for Upper Sorbian. At present, you can only do up to B2 level from A1. For Irish, you can do from A1 to C1, and from Catalan, there is no A1 level examination. The basic examination is at A2 level up to the advanced, the superior level to C2. Okay, national international recognition. As you can see here, I've got the logo for ALTE. The tech exams for Irish are a full member, and they have something called the Q mark, which is a kite mark of quality that shows that these examinations display best practice. In Ireland, the tech examination is recognized for teacher training. All the students who want to become teachers of Irish language in schools need to prove that they have a certain level, in this case B2. And there are also certain scholarships available that fluent speakers of Irish can apply for, and here the C1 certification is necessary. For Upper Sorbian, as I've mentioned, the qualifications are very, very new. It's not currently a full member of ALTE or even an associate member. Maybe this is something that could happen in the future. So it really needs kind of wider recognition. But as I've mentioned, it's very, very new. And as Michael mentioned, there are these people who use Sorbian professionally, and obviously they may need in the future certification and so on to recognize their skills. In terms of the Ramon examinations for Catalan, well, they're fully accredited by ALTE. As I've mentioned, these examinations are aimed at learners of Catalan who reside outside of the traditional Catalan-speaking areas. However, what's interesting is that within the framework of all the Catalan language exams, which are also offered, for example, for native speakers, L1 speakers, the Ramon exams are considered equally valid for competition for educational posts, teaching, or civil service. There has been a little bit of controversy about this, but again, I haven't really got much time to delve into it. In terms of the third aspect, availability and accessibility. Well, Irish, I mean, obviously you consider the examinations in Ireland, and that also includes Northern Ireland as well, in Belfast. There's examination venues in the United States as well, in New York, in Washington, DC, and also in Minnesota. Exams have been offered recently in France and in Canada, and previously also in Prague. In terms of the prices, you can see these are quite expensive qualifications. These compare to premium international qualifications such as the Cambridge English exams or the Delft exams for French. I guess the contrast is with Upper Sorbian, where you can take the exam on a yearly basis, but only within Upper Lusatia. So if you want to get a credential to prove your Sorbian, you have to travel to there to get it. But it's much, much cheaper, €50. And for some groups, for example, school students or university students, rather, there are no fees at all. This is also the case for Catalan exams in certain countries. So for example, here in Poland, the students receive the exams free of charge, whereas in other countries, I think mostly in Western Europe, North America, there are a nominal fee is charged of €35 to €45, depending on the level. However, the reach of the Catalan exams is extremely impressive because there are over 50 different examination centers, typically as part of this Jarjalul, this network that I mentioned, in over 2 dozen countries. Okay, as I've mentioned, this is very, very much a preliminary study, personal project. So here are some concluding remarks, basically suggestions really for further research, and also to maybe start a conversation about the role of certification for other minority and endangered languages as well. So I basically briefly outlined and defined the current certification schemes for these 3 languages, for Irish, Upper Sorbian, and Catalan. For all of the qualifications, they have developed certificates in accordance with international frameworks, the Common European Framework. For the case of Irish and Catalan, these have also been accredited at the international level by ALTE. And they also have domestic recognition by the governments there for teaching and civil service and other purposes. However, Upper Sorbian, perhaps because of their newness, these qualifications still need wider recognition. Maybe in the future, events to revitalize and encourage the use of the language are still ongoing. It just remains to be seen what happens. In terms of further research, and I think this is something that could be very, very interesting, obviously interviews with policymakers, people who are behind the development of these certifications, people who have really pushed for the development, for the standardization rather, and accreditation of these qualifications. This could be done through questionnaires with people working at the awarding bodies, and also with the language learners themselves. Why are they doing this? Are they new speakers? Are they heritage learners? Are these L1 speakers seeking a qualification and so on? You know, in terms of the broader framework, this could be very, very interesting. And I think also comparative work could be something. There are many, many certifications for minority languages that I uncovered, you know, things for Cornish, for Northern Sami in Finland, for example, for Tatar. The Kazan Federal University in Tatarstan in Russia is an associate member of ALTE, for example. So this is something that could really be interesting for the future, and hopefully there will be the opportunity to conduct further practical research in the field in the future once the pandemic is over. So with that, I hope I've kept to time. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.